Imagine stepping into a bustling medieval market square on a crisp morning. The air smells faintly of fresh bread from the baker's stall, mingled with the earthy scent of hay and livestock. Merchants shout out their wares, and the clatter of hooves against cobblestones echoes in the narrow streets. In the middle of this noise and color, you notice glances being exchanged. A young woman in a woolen dress meets the eyes of a man carrying sacks of grain, and there is a spark that feels as old as time itself. Love in the medieval world was not so different from love today, in the way it began with a glance or a laugh. Yet the rules, rituals, and possibilities were shaped by a world bound by tradition, religion, and social status. In the medieval era, love did not often start with freedom of choice. Marriages among the nobility were frequently arranged to secure land, wealth, or alliances. Yet even within these arrangements, feelings sometimes bloomed. A noblewoman might meet her future husband for the first time at a feast organized by their families, where the hall was alive with music, flickering candlelight, and the warmth of roasted meats on the table. If their eyes met across the long oak board, and a smile lingered longer than courtesy required, a quiet ember of affection could begin to burn despite the fact that their union was decided by ink on parchment rather than by hearts alone. Among the peasantry, the search for love could be more flexible, though still governed by community expectations. In villages where everyone knew each other's names and stories, potential partners often met during festivals, harvest celebrations, or Sunday gatherings after church. Picture a May Day festival where ribbons of bright color twirl around a tall pole. Musicians play lively tunes on fiddles and flutes, and young men and women steal moments to talk while pretending to fetch water or bread. Courtship could be subtle, built on shared work in the fields. Conversations at the communal well, or simply walking together along the dirt track back to the village. Courtly love, a romantic ideal celebrated in poems and songs, was another way love was imagined and experienced, especially among the upper classes. Troubadours sang verses about noble knights devoted to ladies they could not always marry. This love was often idealized and distant, full of longing and chivalric gestures. A knight might dedicate a tournament victory to a lady, offering her a token such as a ribbon or a glove to tie around his arm as he rode into competition. These public acts were part of a language of romance, a way of expressing admiration and devotion without breaking the boundaries set by marriage and rank. In many cases, love and attraction had to find ways to survive within constraints. If two people from different social standings fell for each other, secrecy became their closest ally. A meeting might happen under the cover of night in a quiet garden, with a scent of roses and damp earth wrapped around whispered promises. Lovers exchanged gifts that could be easily hidden: a carved wooden brooch, a piece of lace, a pressed flower, each a silent declaration that they belonged to each other, even if the world said otherwise. Festivals and religious celebrations provided some of the rare opportunities for strangers to meet. Pilgrimages were not just spiritual journeys, but also social ones. As people walked long roads toward shrines and holy sites, conversations could grow into bonds. Imagine a group of pilgrims trudging along a muddy path, the rain making their cloaks heavy, when two travelers fall into step beside one another. They talk to pass the time, sharing bread and stories by the roadside fires. By the journey's end, they part reluctantly, with the hope that fate might cross their paths again. Love in medieval times also thrived in places where people worked closely together. Apprentices in a trade might fall for the daughters of their masters, or a shepherd might meet someone tending geese in a neighboring field. These relationships often grew slowly, built on months or years of daily contact. Were small acts of kindness, offering help with a heavy load, mending a garment, began to carry deeper meaning. The rhythm of medieval life, with its hard labor and shared struggles, meant that love often emerged as a partnership of survival as much as affection. Flirtation took many forms, and words were not always the first step. Body language spoke volumes. A glance held for a moment too long, a hand brushing against another's when passing a jug of ale, or a shared smile over a private joke in a crowded room could signal the start of something more. Sometimes songs or riddles were used to express feelings indirectly, allowing one to speak of love without openly declaring it. In villages, a young man might serenade outside a woman's window, his voice carrying into the night air, or leave small gifts where she was sure to find them. The church, while central to life, both limited and shaped romance. Priests preached against lust and reminded the faithful of their duties. Yet the church also sanctified marriage and celebrated the bond between husband and wife. Love letters, often dictated to scribes for those who could not write, were filled with flowery language and invocations to God, asking for blessings on the union. In the wealthier classes, illuminated manuscripts containing poems or psalms could be gifted as expressions of devotion. The art in gold leaf is much a statement as the words themselves. In towns and cities, marketplaces became stages for social interaction. A young woman selling herbs might draw in customers with her smile, lingering in conversation with one in particular. Tanner or a blacksmith might make excuses to walk past the same stall every day, offering coins for goods he did not truly need. The sounds of merchants haggling and the smells of spices and livestock provided a noisy, vivid backdrop to these subtle exchanges. Not every love story in the medieval period ended in marriage, and not every marriage was born of love. Yet people still found ways to carve out spaces for affection and companionship within the frameworks they lived under. In some rare cases, especially among peasants, marriages were formed purely from mutual choice and attraction. Couples might stand in front of their community and pledge themselves to each other, binding their lives together in the eyes of God and neighbor without any nobleman's seal on the agreement. Winter evenings in the countryside could be times for romance too. Families gathered around the hearth, telling stories and singing songs while the wind howled outside. Young people might slip outside into the cold, where their breath clouded in the air and the stars glittered overhead. These moments of stolen privacy could be treasured for years, even if life later took them in different directions. Some love grew in the most unexpected places. Prisoners of war sometimes fell in love with the people who cared for them. Widows and widowers might find affection again in later life, proving that love was not only the domain of youth. Monks and nuns, bound by vows, occasionally experienced feelings that challenged their devotion, inspiring some of the most passionate and conflicted writings of the age. The material world of medieval romance was rich with symbolism. A ring was not merely a piece of jewelry, but a binding promise. Colors carried meaning: red for passion, blue for loyalty. Flowers were not given idly. Each bloom had its own significance. Even the act of sharing food could be a romantic gesture, with apples. Nuts or honeycomb offered as tokens of sweetness and fertility. As centuries passed, the medieval ideal of love was immortalized in stories and legends. Tales of Tristan and Isolde, or Lancelot and Guinevere, mixed tragedy with longing, influencing how people thought about passion and devotion. These narratives, told by firelight or sung in great halls, taught lessons about loyalty, sacrifice, and the price of forbidden love. In reality, medieval love was both practical and poetic, shaped by survival, duty, and the constraints of the world, yet driven by the same desires that have always stirred the human heart. People sought connection in the fields, in the crowded halls of castles, in the shadowed corners of marketplaces, and in the open air of festival greens. They found it in the smallest gestures and in the grandest declarations, in moments of joy and in the ache of separation. If you could step into that time, you might find love not in the sweeping gesture of a knight kneeling before a lady, but in the shared cup of ale after a long day's work, in the clasp of hands beneath a church pew, or in the shy smile of someone passing you on a muddy village path. Despite the centuries between then and now, the way love sparked and grew would feel familiar. It lived in the human need to be seen and cherished, and it thrived in the spaces where people dared to reach out to each other, even when the world told them not to. Because in medieval times, as in every age, love found a way. It slipped through the cracks of duty and tradition, weaving itself into everyday life, like threads of gold hidden in plain cloth. And once found, it was guarded fiercely, for it was as precious then as it is today. And so, as we leave behind the cobblestone streets and the flicker of torchlight, it becomes clear that love in medieval times was not just about grand gestures or noble romances sung by troubadours. It was about finding connection in the smallest of moments. It could be a glance across the market square, the shared laughter at a festival, or the warmth of a hand offered during a cold winter walk. These were the moments that gave life its sweetness, even in a world ruled by duty and tradition. The medieval heart was no different from ours. People longed to be understood, to be chosen, to have someone who looked at them and saw more than their social standing or family name. They found ways to nurture affection through gifts, songs, secret meetings, and words spoken softly where no one else could hear. So the next time you hear a story of knights, castles, and royal marriages, remember that behind the politics and pageantry, real people were searching for the same thing we still seek today. Love was not bound by the centuries. It always found a way, and it still does. After all, some things never change.